It probably comes as no surprise that Americans' trust in mass media is at one of the lowest points it's been since we started tracking it in 1972. And the US was even recently ranked dead last out of 46 countries in a survey of perceived news media trustworthiness. We're constantly berated with 30-second soundbites from 2 or more polarizing angles, often on incredibly nuanced issues, but without the nuance. But this behavior is nothing new. In fact, it's been somewhat of an American staple since at least the mid-19th century. So much so that its foundation is inextricably linked to the most prestigious award we hand out in journalism to this day. This is the problem with the Pulitzer Prize. I'd be willing to bet money you've heard this before.
Pulitzer Prize winning.
Pulitzer Prize winner.
Pulitzer Prize winning.
Pulitzer Prize winner.
And you'd be forgiven for not knowing exactly what that means, apart from it bestowing prestige and pomp upon people that strung a bunch of words or sounds together in a sequence that pleased a group of powerful people. That was a sentence. So before we dive into the origin of the prize and what the problem is with it, let's get up to speed on what the prize actually is. The Pulitzer Prize is awarded annually by Columbia University to recognize the height of excellence in journalism, books, drama, and music. The prize can be awarded to individuals, editorial teams, or even entire publications or groups. Despite the name being deceptively singular, there are actually up to 22 Pulitzer Prizes awarded each year. So if you're wondering how there seem to be so many Pulitzer Prizes floating around despite it only being awarded once a year, there you go. 21 of these categories receive a $15,000 check and a certificate. But the winner for the Public Service and Journalism Award gets a gold medal. That kind of sounds like a joke, but they really do. This is what it looks like. Believe it or not, anybody can submit an entry to be considered for a Pulitzer Prize, as long as you're a US citizen or a US-based company, and you can chuck 75 buckaroos at them for the entry fee. This open entry model has actually become a hilariously ironic issue in itself, but we'll circle back around to that later. The winners of the Pulitzer Prize are chosen by an 18-person board, all of whom seem to have been made important by their affiliation with an Ivy League university, major publishing house, and or a popular media outlet. In late May or early June of each year, up to 22 prizes are awarded, one for each category. So that's the prize. But, who's Pulitzer? The Pulitzer Prize is named after Joseph Pulitzer, an incredibly wealthy late 19th/early 20th century media magnate who owned a prominent newspaper called the New York World from 1883 until his death in 1911. Pulitzer was born in Hungary in 1847 and immigrated to the United States in 1864 to fight with the Union during the American Civil War. After the Union's victory, Pulitzer traveled around the country in search of new opportunities before finally landing in St. Louis, Missouri. In 1867, he got his first reporting gig at a German-language newspaper called the Westliche Post. I'm pretty sure I didn't say that right. By 1872, Pulitzer had become part owner of that paper, and he was extremely successful, enough to start a collection. In 1872, Pulitzer started purchasing other publications, starting with the St. Louis Post and then the St. Louis Dispatch in 1878. And finally, in 1883, Pulitzer would purchase the paper he's most known for today, the famously problematic New York World. The New York World was founded in 1860, and it had somewhat of a tarnished reputation under its original owner and editor, Manton Marble. In 1864, the paper was actually shut down for 3 days after he published excerpts from an extremely controversial pamphlet falsely attributed to Abraham Lincoln during the 1864 presidential election. Even after Marble sold the paper in 1876, controversy seemed to just follow it around, with a series of subsequent owners using it essentially as a propaganda machine to further their own agendas. They also seemed to use it as a way to just light money on fire because it just continuously suffered losses. Once Joseph Pulitzer bought it, though, he aggressively reformed its content, its circulation, and even its color, making it the first newspaper to include a color supplement in its Sunday edition. But it's in Pulitzer's time at the New York World where things started to take a turn. In his reforming and making profitable the New York World, Pulitzer needed to make money. And by this point, he was very well aware of the power that the media held and what most easily held the attention of the common man. And it's here that Joseph Pulitzer held profits above everything else, including truth. The New York World was repeatedly accused of printing sensationalized stories just to sell papers, and had a pretty rough track record when it came to upholding the truth and nothing but. It's not that Pulitzer would just make up stories for no reason, but if the truth wasn't juicy enough and the headline wasn't eye-grabbing enough, then he would just alter them until they were. Kind of like YouTube thumbnails. At the same time, Pulitzer was also known for his political activism, campaigning against corrupt government and championing certain Democratic candidates. He smeared political opponents in his own paper, utilizing and sometimes even fabricating scandals just to public shame and sway votes. Around 1895, Pulitzer got in a heated rivalry with another media magnate you might have heard of, William Randolph Hearst. Hearst had purchased and ran the New York Journal, which was a direct competitor to Pulitzer's World. Interesting side note here, Joseph Pulitzer's brother, Albert Pulitzer, actually founded the New York Journal before he sold it to some dude who then sold it to Hearst. Big mistake for his big brother Joe. Hearst's New York Journal had a similar penchant for printing sensationalized slime, and both Hearst and Pulitzer slung their mix of mud and truth to the masses, with the goals of heftier profits and increased circulation rather than a properly informed public. Both are known for being among the most powerful, if not the most powerful, pioneers in journalism, but also somewhat paradoxically for tarnishing its credibility. You see, Pulitzer and Hearst's rivalry birthed what we know today as yellow journalism, or journalism that relies on sensationalism and exaggeration. The more scandalous and salacious and violent, the better, basically. Hearst and Pulitzer continuously tried to out-sensationalize each other in an attempt to sell papers, with one British journalist actually calling their rivalry a contest of madmen for the primacy of a sewer. Here are some examples of just how nasty their papers got, filled with all kinds of sex scandals, crime, and dirty politics. One of the most notorious stories that each man ran in their papers was in 1898 in the lead up to the Spanish-American War. Both men ran stories in their papers claiming that the sinking of a U.S. Navy ship, the USS Maine, was the act of a Spanish bomb or torpedo, despite there being no evidence for this. There are some that say that this fake news helped kick off the Spanish-American War by riling up the American public and promoting anti-Spanish sentiment. Others claim that the eye-grabbing, sensationalized headlines that Pulitzer and Hearst ran in their papers had nothing to do with the US government or military decisions, and that their influence is completely overblown. And to both sides, I say, I have no idea. I don't even know what a weekday feels like anymore. But I will say I think it a grave mistake to discount the influence of mass media in politics. Joseph Pulitzer ran the New York World until his death in 1911, but he wasn't about to let some pesky little thing like non-existence get in the way of him controlling his own legacy. In his will, Pulitzer provided for a $2 million endowment to Columbia University on the condition that they create and hand out Pulitzer Prizes and scholarships to young men and establish a school of journalism. He actually instructed the executor of his will to withhold $1 million of that until Columbia could prove that they could keep a school of journalism running for at least 3 years. With money as a motivator, the folks at Columbia University probably would have kept it running for 100 years just to snag that cash. And they did. Today, Columbia University is one of the highest ranking and one of the oldest schools of journalism in the world. Over the years, Pulitzer's posthumous generosity helped to clean up his legacy as much as possible. Truthful journalism was not his end goal, but now we celebrate and recognize the pinnacle of journalistic integrity with his name. Such was the power of the money and influence of a man who lacked a great deal of integrity himself. Today, Pulitzer Prize winners wear their awards like gold stars, and it's often warranted. A lot of great works and honest journalists win the Pulitzer, but some unscrupulous folk also throw around Pulitzer Prize nominations like a gold star. I remember what I mentioned earlier, that anybody in the US can be considered for a Pulitzer if you just throw them $75. Well, this has led to an ironic situation where people submit their own works to a contest of integrity so they can falsely claim they're a Pulitzer Prize nominee in their book jackets or whatever. It's great. It's fantastic. The Pulitzer board strongly discourages this, but they're powerless to stop it, of course. What are they going to do? The Pulitzer Prize has endured over 100 years, and the legacy of Joseph Pulitzer is now one of an impassioned truth crusader, with many quick to downplay the role he had in founding the scourge of yellow journalism. Maybe he had some regrets towards the end of his life, and the fat stacks that he threw at Columbia's bigwigs were a way to atone for this by investing in the education of honest journalism. But it seems a bit more likely that Pulitzer didn't have a change of heart, and that instead, like many of the robber barons who built America, Pulitzer's gift to Columbia was just another attempt to continue championing his own success and image from the grave. In either case, it unfortunately worked.